Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a massive, honestly game-changing paradigm shift in how we understand artificial intelligence and social power. We're moving way past those old, familiar conversations about the internet and stepping directly into the invisible architecture of modern algorithmic power. Now, before we really get going, I want to set the foundation. The AI Inequality Regime is a concept developed by Massimo Ragnedda and Maria Lara Ruiu in their book, The Inequality Regime of AI. This 2027 Routledge publication gives us the exact intellectual framework we need to unpack all of this.
Here's a quick look at our roadmap. We'll start by looking beyond the digital divide, define what this AI inequality regime actually is, break down its 3 dimensions of power, explore 3 specific AI divides, and wrap up with the stratification spiral.
Section 1. Beyond the digital divide. Rethinking inequality.
To really get this, we have to start by explicitly challenging some deeply outdated assumptions. For decades, sociologists were entirely focused on the digital divide, essentially the gap between the connected and disconnected. It was all about hardware, laptops, and broadband access. But reducing tech inequality to mere access today, it completely misses the actual power dynamics at play. It's no longer just about whether you can log online, it's about legibility. Are you rendered interpretable to the algorithmic systems that now govern our social lives?
And that brings us to our core definition. The AI inequality regime is a recursive, allocative, and epistemic configuration where prediction becomes a structuring principle of social order. Sounds a bit academic, right? But to put that into perspective, did you know that in some major cities right now, predictive algorithms are already determining which exact neighborhoods get infrastructure repairs, and they're doing it before human planners even glance at a map? Inequality isn't just a byproduct of human bias anymore. It's actively encoded into predictive logic as a structural, everyday routine of how we are governed.
Section 2. The AI Inequality Regime. Deconstructing the historical shift. Think about the information age. Back then, inequality was centered on networked infrastructures, right? It was about who controlled communication flows in digital platforms. But we've fundamentally transitioned into what the authors call AI capitalism. In this new era, inequality is driven by predictive sorting and allocation. Power now revolves entirely around the control of intelligence itself, the raw capacity to sense, classify, predict, and ultimately decide.
Okay, let's really dive into this, because this is the absolute core of the allocative turn. We've shifted from extracting surplus value through traditional production to extracting value through prediction. These AI systems literally allocate life chances. They determine your eligibility for a loan, your access to welfare, where you sit on a healthcare priority list, and even your security risk level. And they do all of this as a massive apparatus for sorting populations, all neatly legitimized by the seemingly neutral, objective language of efficiency.
Section 3. 3 dimensions of power. The structural mechanics. Mechanically, this entire regime operates across 3 core dimensions. First up is durability. AI establishes these deeply patterned arrangements of power that persist even as the technology itself changes. Second is its governing logic. The defaults and incentives of these systems actively shape which human behaviors are even considered intelligible. And third, its normalizing force. This is where structural power gets transformed into technical defaults, meaning deep historical societal biases are suddenly rebranded as pure mathematical efficiency. Actually, to anchor this high-level theory, let's look at Virginia Eubank's absolutely vital research on automated welfare systems. In a traditional bureaucratic decision, you have a social worker, there's human judgment, there's discretion, and crucially, there is an ethical encounter between 2 people. But under automated optimization, that ethical encounter just dissolves into moral indifference. Poverty is effectively criminalized by design because low-income individuals are automatically flagged as fraud risks based entirely on statistical common sense. The machine doesn't care, it literally just optimizes.
Section 4. The 3 AI divides. The new battlegrounds.
So, we are dealing with 3 interdependent fractures here: the data divide, the algorithmic divide, and the governance divide. What this cleanly illustrates is that we aren't just dealing with a stray biased algorithm here or there. No, we are looking at a profound structural lack of computational sovereignty across multiple layers of society. Let's break each of these down. First, the data divide. What's absolutely fascinating here is the duality of this conflict. It's all about whose lives become visible to data systems. If you're marginalized or poor, being visible often means being hyper-visible. You are constantly monitored and automatically flagged as high risk.
But on the flip side, if your lived experience doesn't neatly fit into their predefined models, you suffer from invisibility as neglect. You never even register for opportunities or vital resources.
Next up is the algorithmic divide. This fracture reflects massive asymmetries in design and interpretive authority. It dictates who actually gets to design the models and, by extension, set our predictive futures. Those with the computational resources and expertise effectively get to design and inhabit the future. Meanwhile, those without that authority, well, they merely get predicted, processed, and managed in the present.
And finally, the governance divide. This is about ultimate power. It reveals the glaring disparities in who gets to determine the optimization criteria. Think about it. Who actually decides what efficiency means? Who sets the rules for accountability? Governance is where deeply political and moral choices are made, but they are deliberately hidden behind the smokescreen of neutral math and basic regulatory compliance.
Section 5. The stratification spiral. How the divides interact.
So let's see how this all builds, because these fractures definitely do not exist in isolation. They interact recursively. It starts with unequal data collection, which is already rooted in historical bias. That unequal data gets fed into models, producing biased algorithmic interpretations. Then, institutions use those exact outputs to allocate resources, maybe denying a loan or deploying extra police to a specific neighborhood. Finally, those institutional actions generate new, confirmatory data, which feeds right back into the system. This loop takes historically contingent biases and locks them in as automated, statistical common sense.
So here is the absolutely crucial takeaway. AI does not automate neutrality. It actively automates inequality. It stabilizes social stratification and makes it look completely objective. And what this creates for all of us is what the authors brilliantly call an algorithmic habitus. Think about it. We subtly adjust our behavior every single day. Every click, every post, every interaction is tweaked just to remain visible, relevant, and positively classified as low risk to these incredibly opaque systems. We are constantly optimizing ourselves just to be legible to the machine.
Which brings us to a vital question to leave you with today. How does this AI stratification spiral trap us in our daily lives? And way more importantly, how can we possibly break it to move toward true epistemic justice? As this spiral tightens around our institutions, understanding its hidden mechanics is step one toward reclaiming our futures. We've mapped the architecture of the regime today, but how do we survive it? Keep that provocative question in mind, because that recursive trap is exactly what we will take a deep dive into in part 2 of this explainer. Thanks so much for joining me today.